Wasteland, the franchise that helped shape the role-playing game genre, is back and proves why it's still the reigning champ of tactical video games, with a robust story, a deeply explorative world, and an unprecedented level of choice. The third game in the series provides a great jumping-on point for new players, both to Wasteland and tactical RPGs in general, but also a rewarding experience for longtime fans. Wasteland 3 continues the story of the Desert Rangers, who have traveled from the arid landscapes of Arizona to the bitter cold of Colorado. They seek the help of the Patriarch, the ruler of the former state. He has called upon the Rangers to help wrangle in his rebellious children, and in return will supply them with weapons, vehicles, personnel, and operational bases. The story starts off simple enough, but quickly spirals in 1,000 different directions, offering the player numerous paths they can take to either aid or potentially betray the Patriarch. Each location you visit is packed with unique characters, the stories of which form the narrative tapestry of Colorado. The quests they offer can range from single tasks to multi-level experiences that either minimally or greatly affect the ultimate goal of assisting the Patriarch. The beauty of Wasteland 3 is how it hides its mechanics. While playing, it's not obvious if the choice you're about to make will have a massive effect on future endeavors or not. Unlike some games that provide clear deviations in the narrative the player can choose between, the structure of Wasteland 3 is incredibly subtle. It forces the player to make choices based on their own moral compass, rather than trying to predict how what they do will affect the game. During my playthrough, there were a handful of times when I tried to manipulate the situation into a more favorable outcome, but due to a few unforeseen circumstances I had made, the results were often something I could never have predicted. What isn't as subtle is the game's writing. While Wasteland 3 is set in a grim post-apocalyptic world, it has a rather light and humorous tone, similar to the Fallout franchise, which the original Wasteland was a big influence of. The game elicits as many chuckles as it does groans, however, with several of its lines of dialogue. For example, when visiting a brothel in search of a traitorous character, you have the option of paying for sex by asking the owner, "Let's talk about having some sexy time," which is perhaps the least sexy thing anyone can say. I often wish the dialogue was a little more sophisticated at times and didn't read like it had been written by a teenager that was snickering to themselves as they wrote, with characters that were constructed in a more contemporary manner. That being said, there's thousands of lines of text in the game, so these moments are mostly lost in the sea of words the player will be engaging with. I just wish it was understood that sometimes humorous doesn't always mean juvenile, and that the game applied the nuance it wields with its structure to its writing. Participating in the story is not a single protagonist, but a crew of them. From the jump, the player is given the option to pick from several pairings of characters, or the option to create their own pair. Each character has skills, perks, and attributes that shape who they are. Perhaps they are excellent with a sniper rifle, or maybe more skilled with weapons that are up close and personal. Are they the strong silent type, or can they talk themselves out of any situation? Do they dive headfirst into battle, able to absorb a tremendous amount of damage, or are their armor levels low, dealing blows from a distance? The customization options are deep, with players able to create any pairing of characters they so desire. Early on in the game, they will then pick up 2 more rangers from a predetermined list, as well as additional characters they find in their travels, and perhaps even an animal companion. The amount of humans you can have in your party at any one time is 6, and you can change your crew as you go. Depending on the additional characters on your team depends on the types of side missions that become available to you as you play. Choose wisely, as some characters have much better story missions than others. The crew will travel the wasteland, completing tasks for people, all in the goal of improving the Rangers' situation. Many quests will result in combat, and for the first time in the series, your team and the enemy team will take their turns together, instead of each individual character having their own initiative. It makes for the fastest game in the series by far, and it is a welcome addition, as it is also the biggest and longest entry in the franchise. As you approach enemies, you will see areas of vision around them, so getting the drop and attacking before entering those provides a big boost to your combat advantage. There was one particular mission that I got off on the wrong foot, and I was very quickly decimated by the enemy. On my retry, I got my characters into better starting positions, and it was my foes that met a swift demise. If your rangers or companions perish in battle before you can revive them, don't worry, they're not permanently dead. Once the combat encounter is over, you can use certain items to bring them back, or speak with the doctor back at headquarters. Speaking of HQ, this is another integral gameplay element to Wasteland 3. A gift from the Patriarch to help you in your endeavors, your base can be upgraded over time with improved facilities and new personnel. It's a space to regroup and re-equip gear before setting out into the frozen abyss, and interacting with it is a critical element to the game, acting as an evolving physical representation of your choices on your journey. Traveling between locations in the Wasteland is handled via a large tank named the Kodiak, which is just as customizable as the members of your party. The Overworld map is littered with hidden locations, and sometimes you will come across multiple timed events, forced to choose between quests and lose out on some activities. I would often get lost in the wilderness, exploring every corner of the map I could, before heading to my originally planned destination. The game offers a tremendous amount to see and do, and with it locking out certain areas and stories depending on your choices, a replay is almost guaranteed to be an entirely different game. The original Wasteland was released in 1988, and its sequel was kickstarted in 2014. The creators of these titles, In Exile Entertainment, were purchased by Microsoft in 2018, becoming one of its many acquisitions to create a more robust Xbox game studios. Head of studio Brian Fargo decided to go with the acquisition, as having Microsoft as a parent company would offer him and his team resources to make their games closer to AAA than indie. Wasteland 3 is a prime example of how that acquisition helped the developer, as the game is as much of a leap in presentation as Wasteland 2 was to Wasteland. The graphical fidelity is astonishing, with crisp textures and gorgeous lighting. The music matches the visual quality with an incredible soundtrack. The score blends a bunch of different genres to form a unique sound compared to audio cues typical of post-apocalyptic fare in games and films. There were moments where I'd step away from the keyboard and just listen, afraid that talking to an NPC or engaging in a quest would swap out the current track I was hearing. Despite my qualms with some of the game's writing, there's no denying that the originators of the tactical RPG genre are back to show that they are nearly unmatched in the space, with an almost unprecedented level of storytelling and choice. Combined with an overhauled combat system and a massive audiovisual upgrade, Wasteland 3 is one of the finest tactics games ever made.